All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy middle of September, and thanks for joining us today. As we were just discussing, my name is Elena Keegan, and I'm on staff here at Central Pines Regional Council, formerly known as Triangle J, so you may be more familiar with that name than the new one. We've just rebranded. And we're really excited to kick off. This is the first in a series that we are doing with Civic Federal Credit Union on financial wellness. And we're really excited to be able to offer this to local government employees from across our region. It's open to anyone that works for one of the local governments that we serve, which is why many of you probably received this from someone in your organization that you were able to attend. So we're really happy to do that. I just wanted to quickly make sure that I shared who we are, because I know a lot of you have probably not interacted with us before. We are the regional organization that represents local governments in 7 counties within Central North Carolina. So we serve cities, counties, and towns within Chatham, Durham, Johnson, Lee, Moore, Orange, and Wake. And we provide a lot of direct assistance as well as some regional planning and technical support to local governments across those communities. And one thing that we've started finding more recently is that we're being asked to provide a lot of support to our local governments to provide resources and support to their staff. One thing that came out recently in a survey that we did from HR directors of your organizations was that they really wanted to offer financial wellness training as a benefit to their employees. And so that is how this series came about. And so we're really excited to be partnering with Civic. And I'll turn it over to Greta to just provide a quick welcome on that. This is going to be the first in a series, and we're going to be having this each month with one of the sessions each quarter in person. So hopefully you can join us next month in person for estate planning. But this will be continued to be available throughout the year. And so hopefully you're able to join us to learn more about how you can achieve financial wellness in your own life. And so with that, I will turn it over to Greta. If you want to just say a welcome, provide any context, that would be absolutely great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Greta Gibson, and you can call me Gigi if you can't remember that. Like I was telling Elena, you rarely hear a Greta, so sometimes it's more comfortable for people to say Gigi. But I work for local government federal credit union and Civic Federal Credit Union. And since we're going to be hosting a few of these, I thought I'd give you just some background very quickly on who local government federal credit union and Civic Federal Credit Union are, and then I'll introduce Jamie. And of course, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we can get to them at the end of the presentation. This is a shorter presentation, so we have plenty of time today. So 40 years ago, there was no local government federal credit union, which I'll call LGFCU because that's a mouthful. And so folks who worked for state and local government joined State Employees Credit Union, or SECU. And that was all under the guise that because everybody received state retirement, that they were qualified for membership. And it was challenged, and regulators said, nope, if you work for local government, then you don't work for state. And so local government federal credit union had to form a credit union, and but they had nowhere to go. So we formed a cooperative agreement with State Employees Credit Union. And that said that we could use their branches, their employees, their products and services, and their ATMs for a fee. We pay them 25% of everything that we make. And that was supposed to be a temporary solution, but it was a great solution that has lasted 40 years. It still exists. And about 7 years ago, the State Employees Credit Union said that they were going to service organizational accounts, which affected maybe 4-H accounts and Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts and some of the associations in North Carolina. But the biggest group that was affected was our fire and EMS community, because we had loans for ambulances and fire trucks and fire stations. And it didn't just affect the departments, but the communities that they serve, because if they had to refinance those loans, it would be very costly. And so we created Civic Federal Credit Union, which is a digital credit union. And some people, when they hear the word digital, they're like, oh, digital, that's so scary. But really what it means is it's not dependent on a branch or a piece of paper. How many times have you heard, oh, you need to go to the branch for that, or you got to sign this paper to get that done, right? And so Civic, whenever you open an account, you don't sign signature cards, you don't print and scan anything. It's all digital. It's all on the computer. Even our notary services are online. And we became a full service credit union. And during the pandemic, people really enjoyed that because our branches closed on the LGFCU side because SECU closed their doors. You had to go through the drive-through. but people could be safe and served where they were comfortable with Civic because it was digital. So LGFCU birthed Civic 5 years ago, and it's been up and running. And we have a common mission. I want to share it with you because I think a lot of people on the call will relate to this. Our mission is to improve the lives of our members. We're a 501c. We're a not-for-profit organization. So our goal is to just improve lives, and with in mind people, planet, and prosperity. And the word prosperity really resonates with me because it's an increase in your social status and your wealth, but also your happiness and your health, right? So we want people to be overall well-rounded, successful, and prosperous. So Civic Federal Credit Union has been open for 5 years, and we have decided that local government federal credit union in June of 2025 will leave the state employee credit union. And when we're independent from them, we will use Civic's technology and their banking platform to serve our customers. And we'll change the name of local government federal credit union to Civic Federal Credit Union. And that's to reduce confusion, but also when you join the credit union, you become a shareholder. And so you have a voice. It becomes your credit union. You're my boss, right? If you're a member. And right now we're a little restricted on what we can do because we're under that cooperative agreement with SECU on the LGFCU side. But we found that at Civic, we can offer things like cash reward credit cards, and you can use any ATM in the world and get your feedback, and use Zelle and move money and budgeting tools, all kinds of stuff that people wanted. And the rates tend to be better because we don't have the overhead of all those branches. When those changes occur, if you're a member of LGFCU, you'll receive new debit cards. So you'll want to check your mail, and credit cards if you have one. If you have a loan or a CD, none of those agreements go away. You don't have to refinance them. They'll come over. You'll still have the same rate. And then you'll be invited to download the Civic app so that you can bank and have access to your money from at any time. And we're working to extend the agreement with SECU at their teller line so that you can deposit large amounts of cash and withdraw large amounts of cash. But we're also looking at other options so that you're not restricted to banking hours. So if you need to deposit cash, you can do that on your time. We're also working on creating some physical presence in communities, and that's where you go for help, but also some community spaces where you could have a meeting like this today, right? We could come in and meet and learn together. So there'll be more to come on that. But then finally, I wanted to mention that we sponsor events and programs. We have foundations, so people that have 501c3 agencies can apply for funding. We offer scholarships, and we offer financial wellness programs like the one we're going to have today for free. So if you would like us to come do one, please feel free to reach out. So today, Jamie Barnett is going to be presenting about savings. And Jamie has her master's of business administration. She's a certified financial planner, accredited financial counselor, a behavior financial advisor, a certified financial educator. Basically, Jamie is just certified, right? And take that how you want. But I always say when I'm introducing Jamie, if you, let's say Elena passed out, we were in a meeting and she passed out on the floor and wasn't breathing, and we all called 911, and someone said, "Hey, who's certified in CPR? Can someone help Elena?" And I said, well, when I was 13, I used to babysit and I went through a course, and I've watched Grey's Anatomy, and my husband likes House. I think I can handle it. And then Jamie walks in and says, "Hey, I'm a certified EMT. Who would you trust to help Elena?" Right? That means Jamie's kept up her certifications. She's on top of things. She knows, the ins and outs, and she's doing the best she can to serve poor Elena while she can't breathe. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation today. Please feel free to put anything in the comments if you have questions, comments, if you have some tips you want to share. This is as much your presentation as it is ours. So without further ado, Jamie, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Greta. Greta always leaves very big shoes for me to fill, and I don't pay her for saying that. Elena, can you enable me to share my screen, please? So I can share the presentation, give you guys a visual. Let's see, here we go. Screen 2, which screen? are y'all seeing the presentation or are y'all seeing the?
We see the presentation. You're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We absolutely love doing presentations like the one today. And I know that a lot of you guys probably have never been a participant in one of the presentations. So we're very, very grateful for the opportunity to be able to establish this relationship with you guys. And I'm looking very, very forward to the next several months and doing the series of these. As Elena said, next month is estate planning, and we will be doing some in-person versus virtual presentations. So hopefully it'll be something for everybody. We're starting the series off today, though, with saving for your goals. Now, you would think that this would be a pretty simple thing for someone to do. However, it is a lot harder for someone to save for goals than what the average person may think, especially if it's not something that you're used to or it's not something that you have a whole lot of experience in. A lot of people get the concept of saving, but then whenever something goes wrong or something comes up or whatever the case may be, that's whenever they just really don't know how to get back on track. So what I am hopeful for today, that I will be able to help give you some tips and tricks that you can think about as you're moving forward with whatever your savings goals are, because whatever your savings goals are going to be different from mine, and how we get to the end is also going to be different. What matters is that we accomplish them, and there's no one right way to skin this cat in getting to the end goal of reaching your financial goals. So as Greta said, my name is Jamie Barnett. I am the Vice President of Wealth Management at Civic. We really focus our attention in wealth management on empowering our members and our local government unit employees to manage their finances on their own, make good financial decisions, and take the appropriate actions that will, at the end of the day, result in financial freedom for them. We are not trying to define financial freedom, because there is 1,000,001 different definitions out there if you speak to 1,000,001 people, but we want you to achieve your goals, and we want to help assist you along the way. So I do like starting every presentation off with a quote, and Mr. Hoover here has gotten probably the most relatable quote that I have found. And if we were in person, I would ask you to raise your hand if you have ever felt like you were right there at the finish line and then suddenly the finish line moved. That is the story of my life. And before we jump into the presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about how savings is just a constant thing in my life and how I'm constantly reminded of how important it is. I actually just dropped one of my dogs off this morning for ACL surgery. He tore his ACL on Sunday night. He's a tripod. He has one back leg, and that is obviously the leg that he tore the ACL in. So $4,500 estimate later, he is in surgery today. And if I hadn't have had a savings account, and if I had have done things differently with impulse buying and whatnot, which we're going to talk about throughout the presentation, then I would have been in a little bit different of a position today. Now, is $4,500 ACL surgery what I had saved that money for? Absolutely not. However, here we are. So we'll talk about all of life events and how you can navigate, you can shift, you can adjust regardless of how close you think you are, and then the finish line is moved. So let's talk about some interesting facts about savings. So did you know that 45% of Americans have no savings at all? We are in an environment where we are making more money than we've ever made before. We have better benefits than we have ever had before. Yet almost 50% of us still have no savings. Now, given inflation is outrageous, so there can be arguments made for that. However, inflation goes in ebbs and flows. So that is still an astronomical amount of people who just either A, don't save because they don't want to, or B, can't save for whatever reason. 58% of Americans that have savings have less than $5,000. Now, at one point, $5,000 probably would have been looked at as quite a bit of money. And for some people, it still probably can be looked at as quite a bit of money. However, in today's environment, if you have been to the grocery store lately, you probably have a completely different perspective of what $5,000 is today versus what it was 2 or 3 years ago. So $5,000 in the grand scheme of things, especially considering cost of living and depending on what their lifestyle is, may or may not really be all that much money, because we're striving for the 3 to 6 months of emergency savings for someone to have. And I know for me personally, $5,000 does not meet that 3 to 6 month window at all. So even people who are saving likely are not at the target they need to be. And interestingly enough, in 2020, household savings rates were the highest it's been in over 60 years. Now, we all can probably figure out why, right? Because 2020 hit, we were all stuck at home. We weren't going out. We weren't spending money. Vacations were canceled. We weren't out buying cars. We weren't out eating. So for the first time in over 60 years, household savings rates skyrocketed. And now we're dealing with the aftermath of that, and we're not in such a good boat. But it is interesting to me that whenever given the choice, whenever we're not given the choice, we will save, because I guess we have nothing else to do with our money. So we're like, okay, well, now is as good a time as any to save. A lot of people wonder, like, whenever I'm talking to them about savings and I'm talking to them about budgets, now this is not a budget conversation. However, they do want to get a guideline of like, well, what am I shooting for? Like, I don't really know. I have a budget. I know where my money is going. I have a spreadsheet. I have graphs. I have et cetera, telling me where my money is going. But is this the correct percentages? Like, how do I know if I'm spending too much in housing, or how do I know if I'm spending too much in entertainment? That goes beyond just having the money to do so. So there is this thing out here called the 50-30-20 budget rule. And it is a rule of thumb that 50% of your income is spent on needs. So shelter, food, clothing. 30% is spent on wants, and 20% goes into your savings. So if you're wondering how much of your income you should be saving, the target is 20%. Now, 20% can be broken down into retirement savings, emergency savings, goal savings. It can be all retirement savings. It can be however you want to divvy it up, but 20% is what you should be targeting to save of your income every single month. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the fact that saving money goes well beyond just having a savings account. We're also going to talk about the different money management styles, because you have to be realistic with yourself whenever you're starting out on a savings journey, especially if it's not something that you are overly familiar with or you have not done successfully in the past, because honesty is the best policy, and you need to determine where you are and where you need to be. We're also going to talk about how to create a realistic savings and spending plan for you, because it's going to look different for me. It's going to look different for Greta. It's going to look different for Elena. I am not here to judge what works for you. So that is why we want to focus on your spending and savings plan. And then we're going to talk about why even the best plans fail, because we can have all of the construct in place. We can have everything laid out to the T. And then we have a $4,500 ACL surgery to pay for unexpectedly. So we're going to talk about all of that. And then at the end, we'll take questions. As Greta said, you can put questions in the chat all along. We'll field them at the end. At the end, I will turn my video on. I'm not looking at my camera right now, so it wouldn't do any good for it to be on, but I will come off a video and then we can field questions between Greta and I. So let's talk about saving money going beyond having a savings account. So if we were in person, another question I would ask you is, how many of you guys have a savings account? And I would guess of the 25 participants that I'm seeing in attendance, the majority, if not all of you, would raise your hands. What you do with that savings account is what the difference is in actually having it and using it. It is not enough to say that you have a savings account. And it's also important to know that successful savings doesn't mean that you stop spending. So that is a common misconception. If you're saving for something, then you absolutely just cannot spend money on anything that is unnecessary. That is not true. You have to accept that you will continue to spend money. There are going to be things that can't come up. There are going to be things that you're going to need to do for yourself. And it's going to maybe take away from what you could save. But at the end of the day, if it's what's keeping you sane from a day-to-day perspective, then you have to work that into the budget. So for me, it is my morning coffee. I am a Starbucks addict. So will I gladly go to Starbucks and pay that $8 for a nice latte? Absolutely, I will. Could I save a whole lot of money every month if I didn't do that? I absolutely could. But it is something that I am willing to make the sacrifice for. So you have to accept that you're going to be still spending money. You're going to have to get comfortable with your impulse purchases, and you're going to have to acknowledge them as such. So I'm comfortable saying, yes, I could save $8 2 or 3 times a week if I did not go to Starbucks. But that $8 is more valuable to me spending it at Starbucks than it would be transferring it into a savings account. So when you get comfortable having those conversations with yourself, savings becomes a lot more than just a savings account. It becomes something that you're actively participating in, not something that is sitting on the back burner, something that you are recognizing, hey, I could be doing better, but I'm not striving for perfection. I'm striving for growth. I'm striving for forward movement, whatever that looks like. And then, of course, smarter spending comes from having a plan. So one of the things that, and being in the financial industry, you're going to probably gasp whenever I say this, the word budget drives me crazy because I feel like it's such a restrictive term. And I like to try to get away from that because I don't want any one person to feel like they have to nickel and dime themselves to death to be able to afford and be successful in whatever their financial endeavors are, because that is not the case. And there's a lot of financial professionals out there that will tell you that you have to save every penny that you have. You can't think about buying a new car. You can't think about going to Starbucks. You can't think about doing this and that and the other. But those are the normal human things that keep us sane. So why am I going to set you up for failure, knowing good and well that, yeah, you may come out with best intentions, but if it doesn't fit for your lifestyle, you're going to set yourself up for failure. And then where are you going to be a year from now, whenever that Disney trip that you wanted to save for, that whole plan fell? But you do need to have a plan that is realistic, because willy-nilly it also isn't going to work either. So you need to have an idea of where you're at, what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to get there, and then accept all of the good, bad, and the ugly that's going to come in between point A and point B. And we're going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about the different money management styles. And of the 26 now participants that's in the presentation, there's probably a variety of you that fall in each one of these 4. The idea is to be proactive. All spending is managed, all savings is planned. You have a well-laid structure that you are operating within. However, if I'm being honest, most of us probably do not fall in that category. We range somewhere from passive to reactive to active. So I'm not going to read the slide to you because I know you can do that yourself, but taking just a couple of seconds and reading through the different definitions of these money management styles, I want you to give a little bit of thought, a little bit of inward looking to what money management style best aligns with how you spend money. Are you someone who just spends and goes and until and unless the debit card gets declined, then you don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it, or you get a late notice on your mortgage or your car payment? Or do you have a little bit more of an idea of what's happening and you are reactive? So unless you get that late notice or unless the debit card declines, you're not really going to make any changes. Or are you more in the active category where you're not necessarily spending frivolously, you know kind of sort of where everything's going, you know that everything's going to get paid, you know when you swipe that debit card it's not going to be declined, you know that you're going to have enough money from one paycheck to the other to make ends meet? Or are you more proactive, for the few of you that may be, where you have a well-defined plan, you know exactly where every penny's going, everything is accounted for, even your impulse spending money, because everybody needs a pool of money that they can spend on whatever they want, whenever they want, out of every paycheck. I'm a firm believer of. And then, of course, what we're wanting to do is reach that proactive status where we have a well-laid plan, but it's going to take some time. You have to keep your expectations realistic. If you are a passive spender and you ain't once a single day in your life thought about where your money's going, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and become a proactive spender. It's not going to happen. So you're going to need to identify where you're at and then start making progressive movement towards becoming better and what ways make sense for you in this moment, so you can eventually get to being more proactive. And the reason this is important is because you are going to need to create a realistic spending and savings plan. Here are the steps of how you successfully do that. The first step to start saving money is figuring out how much you spend, right? Like I can sit here all day long and say, I want to spend $100 a paycheck. I mean, I want to save $100 a paycheck, but if I don't have $100 a paycheck to save, then I'm setting myself up for failure right out of the gate. You're going to want to keep track of all of your expenses, and that does mean those impulse buys. So I'm going to have to add into the spending log all the times that I go to Starbucks. And then you're going to have to keep a record of that, right? Like you can't just go through and keep it in your head and do it once and you're done. You're going to have to do this probably month over month, paycheck over paycheck for a few times to really get a good sense of where are my spending holes? Where can I make changes that could effectively allow me to have more money to put away towards X goal? Now you can do this in spreadsheet. You can use an online spending tracker, whatever method you want to use. If you're like my mom, you're going to break out the checkbook register. If you're like my cousin, you're going to have this long drawn out spreadsheet with all these equations that I'm terrified to even look at, much less actually do anything with, because I'm terrified I'm going to break it. But however it works for you. Once you have your data, then you're going to need to organize your budget by that 50, 30, 20 rule that we talked about. What classifies as needs, what classifies as wants, and then your 20% savings. That's going to give you an idea of where your money should be going. Now, that is probably not going to be how your money is going to be broken down at that time. So you're going to need to take that information and then start making adjustments to whatever your current spending is to match that goal of 50, 30, 20. Now, if you live in downtown Raleigh, your cost of living is probably a little bit different than me living out in LaGrange, North Carolina, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away from downtown Raleigh. And you have to take that into consideration too. So my housing is going to cost a lot different than your housing living in downtown Raleigh. So I may inherently spend less on housing, which gives me more money to spend in another category, whereas you're spending more on housing. So you have to make that up in another category by taking money away from those categories to spend. So you're going to have to adjust it based on what your current situation is. And that all goes into the needs, right? So I'm not talking about you being able to go get your hair done every other week or your nails done every other week. I'm talking about actual living expenses that you cannot change, that you have to pay for on a month-to-month basis. Those are the things that you're might have to be a little bit flexible with and take away from the wants category. You may even have to take away from the savings category, but we really try not to touch the 20% savings unless we have to. And you want to include everything in this too. So not just your bank account. If you're one where you're like, oh, I'll use this credit card for that or this credit card for that because I get points or cash back or whatever, you want to include all of that because that is encompassing of all of your spending. So once you know what you spend in a month, then you can start to create a budget. You can start working within those confines of the 50, 30, 20 rule. You can start making changes to what you're spending based on what you're earning. So therefore, you can limit your overspending in the categories that aren't necessary, because let's be honest, going to Starbucks 3 times a week might not be helping you achieve that Disney vacation that you want to go on in 2 years. So you're going to need to look at the long-term plan and accept that sacrifices may have to be made, but you don't want to be so restrictive where if you go out to eat and you spend a little bit too much, you feel like you've fallen off the bandwagon and there's just no recovering from it. So you're going to want to be able to have those, like I like to call them, dotted lines that you work within, knowing that life is going to happen. And that's what makes us human, is being creatures of instant gratification. We have a bad day. We don't feel like going home and cooking. So we go through the drive-through and we get pizza. Well, we probably had frozen pizza at home, but I'm going to tell you what, that Papa John's is going to taste a lot better than that DiGiorno that I have in my freezer. And that's okay. So once you have gotten your budget created and you are seeing where you've seen where your money's going, you create your budget around that, then you want to slowly start including an amount of savings that you're not currently saving that feels comfortable to you. Now, that might be a pretty low amount to start with, and that's okay. You've got to start somewhere. That's the beauty about all this, is if you're starting from zero, you don't really have a whole lot to lose by starting at zero and trying to move forward. Now, the goal is you want to get to that 15 or 20% of your income that you're saving. However, again, it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go to Starbucks today. I'll save that $8 this week. And then maybe next month, you're going to try to make coffee at home 2 days instead of 1. And so you'll save $16 that week. And you do little incremental changes until they become your new habits. And if you can't save as much as you like, then at that point, it may be time to start really looking at how you can cut your expenses. So you're not going to be able to save for a tropical vacation if you want to go on one next summer, let's just say, if all you're doing is cutting out your morning coffee. You'll never make it to the amount that you're going to need to have saved for that. So you want to be realistic in that aspect too. And so maybe you start with a smaller goal, or maybe you start with a shorter term goal, because we are creatures of instant gratification. So if you're wanting the new iPhone that's getting ready to come out, maybe that's what you start with before you try to plan a trip to Cabo for 2 weeks, all expenses paid. So start out with something that's realistic. Know that you've got to be realistic about your savings plan in order to get to whatever these goals are. Now, you may be able to cut that coffee enough to buy that new iPhone, but if you're able to actually go on a tropical vacation by cutting out coffee every morning, please tell me how you do that, because I'm not astute in that area and we're going to need to have some further conversation. So some of the ways that you can look for saving on your fixed monthly expenses is, when's the last time you reviewed your car insurance? We all know car insurance went up this year, some more than others. So have you gotten some quotes lately? Because just because you've always been with Nationwide and that's who your parents were with and that's who your grandparents were with, doesn't mean that's who you have to be with. So take advantage of what is out there to you in the way of insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance. And of course, you want the best bang for your buck. And you also want to make sure that you're staying insured. But if you haven't gotten quotes, that could be a good way to save money. Cell phone plan, same thing. I actually am enrolled to get my doctorate degree, and I just realized that Verizon gives a student discount. I did not know this until I was laying in bed one night and I just Googled student discounts, companies that give student discounts. Verizon was the first one that pulled up. I have been a Verizon customer since 2011. So am I saving a huge amount every month? No, but am I saving $20 or $30 every month? I am, and I'll take it. So just look for ways that maybe you haven't thought of. If you've recently enrolled in school, you do that same Google search I did. Who gives student discounts? If you'd be surprised at who works in the public sector or who gives public sector discounts. So Verizon may give a discount because you work for your city, your town, whatever. Whenever you are looking at your budget, look for reoccurring charges. So one of the things that I see popping up the most often is gym memberships. So yeah, that $10 Planet Fitness gym membership, is it breaking the bank every month? No, but if you haven't used it in 6 to 8 months, you probably aren't. So it's probably time to cut the ties and let it go. Streaming services is another one. So are you really using it enough in order to pay whatever the subscription fees are? So look for things like that and see if there's any way you can trim your budget in that way to free up a few dollars. Now, again, that alone is not going to get you to an extreme amount saved, but every little bit helps. Also, whenever you're looking for fun things to do out and about, look for free activities. We live in a very good area where Raleigh isn't that far from any of us probably, so, or Durham, and there's always free things to do. Instead of going and spending a boatload of money on a paid event, look for festivals, look for parks, look for, you know, whatever, especially now that it's fall, it's a great time, or it's going into fall, it's a great time to be outside. Examine the cost of eating out versus cooking at home. This one used to be a much more heavy player in the arena, but given inflation at the current moment, some people, it legitimately just makes more sense for them to eat out. And I am in that boat. I live alone. So if I cook, then I better be prepared to want to eat leftovers for several days in a row. And if I'm not, does the Bojangles drive-through probably sound like a better option? And is it probably going to be cheaper? It probably will be. So look at your situation and just make sure that whatever you're doing in the way of groceries and food makes sense for you and your family, whatever that structure looks like. And then one of the biggest things I cannot stress enough is wait before you buy. So I will be 100% honest with you. I am an impulse buyer. If I want something, I want it right now. And if I can get it to me right now, that's how I'm going to do it, without paying for shipping, of course, because I refuse to do that. However, give yourself a breather. So if you're facing something like you get off of work today, you go home, you decide that you want a new TV. Do you need a new TV? No. Do you want a new TV? Absolutely. So now you're on Amazon, you're on Sam's Club, you're Googling away. Before you actually purchase that item, give yourself a 2 to 3 day cool down period. If after 2 to 3 days, you still want whatever this big ticket item is, and you're okay with the sacrifice that's going to come with it, because maybe now you do have to take money out of that savings account that you have been working so hard to save in, then do it. But try to give yourself that cool down period, because if you do that, then that might change your mentality and prevent buyer's remorse at a later time. And then another really good tip is set a savings goal that you are passionate about. So if saving to pay your taxes every year is not something that just gets you fired up to get out of bed in the morning, then do not start your savings journey out with saving to pay for taxes. Save for something that you are excited about, something that you want to do, something that you want to purchase. Because once you prove to yourself that you can do it and you have a goal that you're working towards that you really are passionate about, it's going to make it so much easier for you to stay on track. And it's also going to make it easier to get back on track if you fall off of track, because that will happen too. And so the short-term goals usually are 1 to 3 years. And then long-term goals typically are 4 or more years. So start out with a short-term goal, because again, creatures of instant gratification, we like to be rewarded sooner rather than later for our hard work. And then as you start meeting those short-term goals, then start implementing a few long-term goals. Maybe you want to move. Maybe you need to save for a down payment. Maybe you're wanting to help your children for college. Maybe you're needing to save for a car for your children. And just make sure that it's obtainable, right? Like don't set yourself up for failure. If you know that you're not going to be able to afford to buy your child a Maserati, then don't set the goal to buy your kid a luxury car. So just be realistic in that way whenever you're setting goals. So you also want to determine your financial priorities. And this is something
Hey, Jamie, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we're on the right slide. Should we still see one that says create a realistic spending?
Yes, I'm going through the steps.
Okay.
So we're
I
on
just was double checking. I was just double checking. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of slides for this presentation.
No, you're good. You're
Um,
good. I just got nervous because you had details that I wanted to make sure we weren't missing something.
Yes.
You're good.
So you want to set your financial priorities or determine your financial priorities, and you're going to be doing this all along. We've talked about it. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing is aligning with whatever is important to you and your family. You don't want to stretch yourself beyond what you are able to do. And so you're just going to want to keep your finger on the pulse with that. Because if you are doing something that is going to benefit you in the long run that you are looking forward to, you're going to be a lot more dedicated to making sure it's going to happen. So determining your financial priorities is sprinkled throughout this whole thing. And then you're going to want to pick the right tools. Okay, so you have a savings account, but is that savings account where you want to save? Is it a savings account that you have historically had free access to, where it's very easy for you to go online, transfer money, because maybe you need more of a roadblock in place. And I will be honest with you, whenever I tell you, I am one of the people who do. So the way I have my savings structured is I have it automatic, which is our next topic. Make it automatic where you don't even think about it, and then save incrementally as you can, but make sure that you have a funds transfer or an automatic deposit going to an account out of every paycheck. And then if you do decide to skip that morning coffee, you're able to transfer that money in at the end of the week or at the end of the month, however you want to do that. But also put those roadblocks in place where you don't have easy access to this money. You can't just log online and say, okay, well, I'm going to transfer $50 over. Or you don't have it set up as overdraft, knowing that if you spend that money on your debit card, it's going to pull from that account. You want to make sure that you put your own fiery hoops in the way. So for me, I can't see the account online. I can't call and have money transferred. So the only way that I'm getting money out of this account is if I physically go to the branch and request a transfer. And even though the closest branch is only 8 minutes away from me, I am not going to drive 8 minutes to transfer $50 over to buy a pair of shoes because I don't have the money in my checking account. So I create my own roadblocks to prevent myself from impulse buying and using this money that I have allotted for something else. So you're going to want to do the same. Make sure that you are picking the right savings vehicle. So probably a savings account, a money market if you have enough to put into it. But you also want to make sure that you're making your savings automatic, and you also want to make sure that you're putting your own roadblocks in place that is going to make it a little bit more challenging for you to access this money because it is for a larger goal. Now, it's fine for you to have your savings account that you dip into from time to time for impulse purchases, but that needs to be separate. There is no limit on the number of savings accounts you can have. You just want to make sure you keep up with them. And then, of course, you're going to want to make sure that you monitor all this, right? So you've done a lot of work up to this point. You have looked at your expenses. You have seen where you are in the way of the 50-30-20 plan. You have looked at your budget, you've overlaid it, you have made changes, you have decided that you're now going to save for XYZ goal, you've decided how much you're going to save, and you're doing your best to make incremental changes to increase the amount of savings that you're saving for said goal. So you're going to occasionally want to see how you're doing. And so this is not a set it and forget it type thing, because things change all the time. Your income might change, the goal might change. If it is a longer term goal, the cost of the goal might change. So you're going to want to make sure that once every 2 or 3 months, you're revisiting this to make sure, okay, has anything changed that would allow me to put more money away? Has my goal itself changed? Because if it's something like vacation, then maybe you've changed where you want to go, and that's going to inherently change the price. So you're just going to want to make sure that you review it from time to time. And I know that was a lot of information, but I can send out the PowerPoint to Elena afterwards if anyone wants to actually see the notes that I have behind the slide. But that is how you're going to create the realistic spending and savings plan for you. I am not here to tell you what your spending and savings plan should look like, what it should be. I'm not here to give you any sort of hard concrete structure of you can't even consider operating without or outside of this realm. You need to do what makes sense for you and your family. and your income, but you need to be realistic about it, and you need to set yourself up for success and not failure. So let's talk about why even some of the best plans fail. So let's say you go through that whole process and you've got the best plan laid out, and you know for sure out of every paycheck you're going to now be able to save $100 because in 3 years you want to go to Hawaii. Well, there's a lot that can happen between now and 3 years, and let's talk about what some of those things are. Inconsistency. So whenever you start saving for a goal, you want to be consistent. You can't save $100 here, $100 there, $100 2 or 3 months from now. It's going to have to be something that you're willing to dedicate that effort to every single paycheck, regardless of what else may be screaming for your attention, especially if it's not urgent. Plans also fail because there's no accountability. Because let's be honest, if you tell yourself that you are going to be saving $100 a paycheck to go on this dream vacation to Hawaii in 2 or 3 years, and you're the only one who's going to know that, then who's going to stop you, or who's going to hold you accountable if you decide to dip into that money to buy a TV or buy the latest game system? You have to have an accountability partner. Now that can be a friend, that can be a spouse, it can be a child, it can be, whoever you want it to be, but someone needs to hold you accountable, because when they start seeing those Amazon boxes pop up, it's going to be like, oh, well, how is that helping you get to Hawaii? A lot of people focus on the short term instead of looking at the big picture. They're looking for something to make them happy in the moment because they've had a bad day, they've had bad luck, they've had a bad week, whatever. We all have been there, and they're looking for something right here and now that's going to make them feel better. And they're willing to sacrifice whatever the bigger picture is to have that instant gratification now. So you're going to have to try to retrain yourself to think about, I'm doing this today because of what I want to do in the future. Insert whatever that is. Impatience and temptation are our worst enemy. You cannot start from 0 today and be at 100% tomorrow. We're going to stumble. We're going to fall. We're not going to see our savings grow as fast as we want. We're not going to get to our dream vacation probably as fast as we want, or whatever that larger goal is that you want to set. So you're going to have to fight against that every single time that you want to spend money unnecessarily, or spend money that is going to take away from what those bigger goals are. Impatience and temptation will ruin a financial plan faster than anything else. Not saying you can't spend the money, but maybe you want to set up another savings goal where you're not messing with the longer term goal. Now you have a shorter term goal account where in 2 or 3 months you can buy that new TV or new gaming system, but you're not going to take money out of the longer term goal account. And then, of course, no support system. It's really hard doing things on our own. So if you can partner up, if you can buddy up, if it's a trip that you're going to be taking with somebody, then make it fun. Or as fun as it can be, right? I mean, it's definitely not going to ever be something that you're going to look forward to doing, spending or saving money, but do it together. And then whenever unexpected expenses throw you a curveball, a lot of people get into the mentality of, oh, well, I'll never recover because I just had to drain my savings account for a surgery for my dog that I was not prepared for. So that set me back $4,500. And now I'm further away from the goal than I was earlier this morning. So you get discouraged. It's going to happen. Life happens. That is the only constant in all of this, is life is going to happen. Life is going to throw us curveballs, and we're going to have to deal with them. So yes, if I had planned on using that $4,500 for a bigger goal, then I'm going to need to spend some time over the next couple of weeks and figure out, what am I going to do now? Because my dog having surgery didn't stop me from wanting to do whatever it was that I was saving for. But I'm going to have to accept that $4,500 is gone. It's not coming back. So I'm starting here and now, and I'm going to have to start moving forward again. And so there were the most common reasons why the best laid plans fail. And this probably can transcend into other areas of your life, but it's very common in the financial realm. So one thing that I want to end with before we take questions, comments, whatever the case may be, is this diagram of success. So one of the things that we deal with a lot in our society is comparing ourselves to others, because we spend an astronomical amount of time every day on social media. Now, you may not be comparing yourself to people you know. It could be people that you only think you know because of 10-second TikToks. But all we see is that iceberg at the top, right? We see these people living their best life. We see these people doing things that we have only ever dreamed of being able to do financially. We don't see anything that comes along with that, because that isn't what drives likes. That is not what drives views. And that is not what makes them seem appealing. So one thing that I like to really point out in all of this is these people that we compare ourselves to, whether it's family, friends, people we don't know, you're probably not getting a very good picture of what they went through to get to where they are. Just like they aren't getting a very good picture of what you went through to get to where you are. So whenever they're on that cruise ship, and it seems like they're on a cruise every other month, or they are world travelers and they're continent hopping once or twice a year, or maybe it's something a little bit more local. Maybe they're just traveling around the United States. I have a friend like that seems like she's in a different state every other month. And it's like, when do you work? I don't have any idea what she did to put herself in that position. But what I do know is I haven't done what it's going to take to put myself in that position. And unless I'm willing to just burn up the credit cards, then I'm going to have to put in more work than what I've currently done. So just keep that in mind. Try not to compare your success and your progress to other people, because you don't know what they have had to deal with under the water. So you just focus on getting yourself to being that island hopper or that continent hopper. And as hard as it is to do not get discouraged because it's not happening as fast as you see it happening for other people. And that is what I will leave you with today, is whenever you are creating a savings plan, your savings for your goals, is a lot more goes into it than just the ability to save or the willingness to save. You have to really deal with a lot of external factors and a lot of curveballs to get to your longer term goals. And again, whenever life throws you a curveball, it's not the end of the game. Don't give up. Just start from that point forward and figure out, all right, I still want to do this in 2 or 3 years. This has happened. I can't do anything about it. But what can I do starting today to make sure that I can make it happen within this time frame, or as close to this time frame as possible? So with that, we will take questions. I can't see the chat, but I am going to quit sharing my screen. I'm going to turn on my camera.
Yeah. And Jamie, I wanted to read you a comment from Katie.
Okay.
She said, this is more spending rather than saving, but what has helped me some is removing the Amazon app from my phone. That way, if I'm going to make a purchase, I have to use a computer, which is less convenient for me. So I'm less likely to do it. And I had written that down on my list. When you remove your debit card or your credit card number from those apps, the impulse buying becomes intentional, because you have to go get your wallet and fill it in.
That is a really good point. And you can't really talk about savings and not talk about spending, because they are directly interlinked. So I love hearing things that other people are doing and it's working for them, because I certainly don't know all the answers. So that's a really good tip. Remove the easy access to the spending. So your automatic reloads, that's another thing that gets me all the time. I go to Starbucks, I swipe, there you go, Greta. I have them scan my app, and then what happens as soon as it hits $5, $25 more reloads. So now that's money I've already spent. So I'm going to just keep going back. So again, those barriers to stop yourself from spending money. So that was a really good tip.
And I don't see any other questions, but I have 2 little tips that I have picked up. I'm not an expert in saving money, but for me, my mindset, whenever I save money, I think I should buy something to compensate. So for example, I live in Asheville and we have Ingles and we have an Advantage card. And so whenever I check out, it shows me how much money I saved for shopping there, right? And so let's say I saved $8.29. I'm thinking, hey, I can go buy a coffee for $8.29. But what I should do if I really want to save that money is put it into a savings account, right? So I went there with the intention of spending the $8.29. I should move it over to the savings account. And another thing is not getting a drink with a meal. So, a Coke or Pepsi or sweet tea is $2.50. And if you have two people, that's can be $5, but I need to put it in my savings account the minute we do it. And I see a question popped up for you, Jamie. Do you think opening a high yield savings account would be a great idea when you're trying to save?
So yes, I mean, you definitely want to get the best bang for your buck when it comes to return, and that could look various different ways. It could be anything from a regular savings account to a money market to an investment account. That being said, you want to make sure whatever that savings vehicle is that you're using makes sense for what the goal is. So if you're wanting to do something short term, I probably wouldn't recommend you going out and locking it up into a 6, 12, 18-month CD that you then have to pay a penalty on, or jumping out and putting it into an investment account that's going to have a higher rate of return. But something like a money market or a savings account, absolutely. Go wherever you're getting your best rate. And Civic does have some pretty good rates right now. I think they're mostly CDs though, which I would recommend not using for something that you're going to be doing short term. But anyway.
I wanted to reiterate something you said, Jamie, that I thought was interesting. I'm sure others heard it as well, but I think building savings into your budget is an interesting approach. And it's something that I definitely I have a budget, I have a crazy spreadsheet, and I've never actually put the savings line in there to sort of factor it in. And so I think that's a really interesting way to almost make it feel not required, but just a part of something that's already set, which I think is really an interesting approach as well.
And it is recommended, like the whole concept to pay yourself first. So we focus on working to pay our bills, working to live, but we very rarely have the mentality of, well, I'm going to pay myself first. So I actually have my savings automatic. It comes straight out of my check that goes into the account that I have separate. So I don't even see the money. It doesn't hit my checking account. It doesn't hit my debit card. So you can do that too, where you can split off some of your check going somewhere completely different to pay yourself first, to ensure that it gets completely removed from the spending pool.
And Jamie, I'm going to encourage you to put on makeup when you go to the grocery store, because Tammy lives in LaGrange too, and she might see you and say, hey, you're that credit union person, and so look your best and be on your best behavior.
So that is really cool, Tammy. Small town, North Carolina. I'm actually from Kinston. I was born and raised, lived in Raleigh for about 15 years, and then moved back in 2021. Refused to move back to Kinston though, so did not cross that Lenore County line.
And I see some comments. I think we should pay ourselves first. And then if you split it when you get a raise, you never see it. And then someone else says, I'm from there, but live in Raleigh. Okay, I moved here from Kingston. Yeah.
Small world. Greta, will you put in the chat, please? We have a new email address. So for anybody that has any questions, comments, whatever, you can email. It is civic_wealth management at is it civicfcu.org? Greta, I think is what the ending is. So if you have questions or you have the discussion you would like to have about your own personal individual situation, you can email me. I'm the only one who checks that inbox, and so you will be hearing directly from me. And we'll use that email address for all the presentations.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I would say just thinking about next steps. I know some folks are jumping off because they've got 1 p.m. meetings. So I want to make sure I take the time to say, first plug our next session, but also Jamie, if you want to give like a final send off of the first thing everyone should do after this webinar.
Yes. So the first thing you should do is plan to take some time this weekend to, at a very minimum, review where your money is going. Because when's the last time you actually did that? Right. Even if you have no intentions of making any changes, because maybe there's absolutely nothing you want to save for, there's nothing that you desire, at least take some time to see where your money is being spent and see how close you are to that 50-30-20 rule. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but I'm saying that's a good guide for you to figure out if you're spending your money where it should be going. And then of course, if you have any questions about that, you can email me. I have handouts that I did not bring with me today because it was chaotic with getting here today, but I can have handouts I can email you back to help assist with what would fall in needs versus wants, savings, etc.
And it looks like Jacqueline has taken a first step to financial freedom. She just went in and unsubscribed from all my subscriptions I hadn't used. Good job.
Good job. And another thing that I will say, and I know this sounds absolutely crazy, is unsubscribe from all those emails that you get like with sales, because I see semi-annual sale, and do I need anything from Yankee Candle? No, I have a cabinet that is about to fall off the wall that I've got so many candles in, but you let them send me a semi-annual sale email and I'm going to open it. Unsubscribe. Just unsubscribe from all of that. And if you don't need it, then you don't need to know that there's a semi-annual sale happening. It's amazing the mental games we have to play with ourselves.
That's a great one. Okay, well, with that, I just want to make sure everyone is aware. So Jamie's gonna be joining us again next month. We're going to be in person for the next event. So we hope you'll join us for that session. It's going to be on estate planning. So we're going to be shifting a little bit. It is October 19th, and it will be at the Central Pines offices, which are off of 40 in near RTP. So encourage you to register. We do require registration for that simply because we want to make sure we know how many folks are coming in person, but we're really excited to welcome you all. And yes, we will make sure to record that as well, although it will not be a hybrid session. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to see all you guys in person. And Greta won't be with us that day. Hopefully I'll have Jamerson with us that day. But we'll get Greta back for November.